Well, simply said, when I think I have the answer, or I believe I am my opinions, or I am that programming, like you said, of course I'm going to see the world through the lens of division, right? You are different than I am. You are different than me for this reason and for that reason. And then we start building these coalitions, if you will, of
Mhm.
separateness. And the truth is something much greater. So living in the question is a simple way of saying stay curious. And as
Yeah.
I ask myself open ended questions, I start to really question the paradigm. And when I say paradigm, just how I'm viewing the world. And I love what Carlton said, have a new thought, right? If I still have the same thought I've always had, I'm going to get the exact same results. It's actually profoundly simple in so many ways. So to be able to open up to different possibilities, curiosity opens us up, judgment restricts. And we are seeing a lot of judgment in the world right now. And so for those of us who are conscious beings, we have a role to play in tuning into curiosity and remaining open.
Peace and riches blessings. I am Michael B. Beckwith, the host of Take Back Your Mind. Peace and blessings, everyone, and welcome to Take Back Your Mind. I am the host, Michael B. Beckwith, the founder of the Agape International Spiritual Center, and I have the privilege and the honor pretty much on a weekly basis to talk to some very beautiful, insightful individuals who, in their own way, have taken back their mind. In other words, their mind is not polluted by the mental garbage of the world. They've moved themselves away and freed themselves from all of the ways by which there's what is called nefarious hypnotism that happens in our culture. And they have a spiritual practice that allows them to stay out of making decisions from fear, but from insight and connection to the present. So today, I have TJ Woodward with me. Good, good afternoon, good morning, good evening, TJ.
So great to see you, Michael. I love being in conversation with you. So I've been looking forward to this and I'm grateful to be here with you.
Absolutely. For those of you who don't know TJ, you haven't heard of him, anything like that, I'll give you a little background on him. Best-selling author, inspirational speaker, revolutionary recovery expert. I like that title. Who has helped countless people through simple but powerful teachings. He's the author of the best-selling books, Conscious Being, Awakening to Your True Nature, Conscious Recovery, A Fresh Embracing the Life of Your Dreams, as well as co-author of their accompanying workbooks. He's a featured thought leader on wholehearted.org, along with Brené Brown, Marianne Williamson, Dr. Gabor Maté, Mark Lundholm, as well as a featured thought leader in the docuseries Addiction Revealed. Now, I know him, okay? He's ordained as an Agape minister by myself and is the founder of the Agape Bay Area in Oakland. Some of you attend that. If you're in the Oakland area, please do, which is the first satellite community of the Agape International Spiritual Center. We're located right here in Los Angeles. And TJ is the creator of the Conscious Recovery Method, which is the groundbreaking and effective approach to viewing, which is very important, viewing and treating addiction. TJ, welcome.
Thank you, Michael. I'm so happy to be here with you. From the moment I first met you, I just felt we were kindred spirits in consciousness. So I just we have no idea what's going to come up in this conversation, but I know it's going to be rich. So I am super grateful.
Absolutely, absolutely. But I like to start with, your origin story. I mean, you've become, just this great teacher in the recovery arena, and not just limited to that. As we indicated, you helped found the satellite of Agape in the Bay Area. You're a minister and you're a counselor. I mean, what is your origin story? How did you enter into this domain of discovering your destiny? What was your background?
Well,
Back-
when I think about that question and I sit with that question, I have to go way back to the beginning because my earliest memories are memories of joy, love, and connection. And the reason I always start with that is because in my experience, certainly in my journey and in everyone else I've ever worked with, that's the essence of who we are. Joy is the operating system that we come in the world as and with before we get programmed. And so by the time I was 7, I had a profound experience of closing my heart. I remember like it was yesterday. It felt like a wall was going around my heart. 7 years after that, I discovered weed and alcohol. 7 years after that, I got sober. And that's
Mm,
really where my spiritual quest began.
really? When you said you felt your heart closing, was there a particular incident or just the environment? I mean, what is it that, as a boy of joy, and then the heart closing, did something happen?
You know, it was a series of events, Michael, being born on planet Earth, right? I remember the first time that I looked at the television, which I really no longer do very often, but at that time I saw war. My grandfather, who I loved, he was using racial slurs like it was just please hand me some coffee. The way
Right,
women were talked about in my family in a derogatory way. Being a little gay boy in Indiana in the 1970s, the list goes on. And I just
right.
remember this sense of being so effervescent and open, and I just suddenly became afraid. And I love your opening because that's when that programming came in. And that from that moment until my spiritual journey began, basically every decision I made was one from that of fear.
Absolutely. So basically, you're describing a defense mechanism
Yeah.
that the heart closed to defend yourself from the onslaught of the maliciousness in our culture.
Right.
And so you had to a little boy had to protect himself. And
Yeah, I call it a brilliant strategy instead of a defense mechanism. It was a brilliant strategy, but it protected me, of course,
yeah,
but it ultimately protected me from the love and connection that I truly desired.
right. And as you indicated, from that space that you began to entertain the drug world and got further from yourself until you got sober and had a spiritual illumination, so to speak. Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah. So, what I like about I mean, I don't like that people go through dark times, but we all do,
Yeah.
is that it's once you go through something like that, I like to say often people when they go through that, they become more trustworthy human beings. They've gone through something, so they're not just believing in something. They're not just having a theory about life. They've actually gone through some darkness and then come out of it, awakening to a greater dimension of their own being. And now they're trustworthy. They can be in the human condition, not drawing everything from the human condition, but they just become more trustworthy people. If something bad happens or if they're tempted to do something negative, they generally steer away from it because they've already been through something that's brought them to another level, back to themselves, actually. Yeah,
That's right.
I used to say years ago, you know, religious people are trying not to go to hell. Spiritual people have already been there,
Yeah.
you know.
More than once.
Yes. And once you've been through hell and back, there's a certain strength. People who get sober, people who reclaim their heart and soul after going down a dark path, there's a certain strength that they have. They're not gonna go down that path anymore for the most part, I would say.
Yeah, and in my journey, what the way you're describing it is I'm so resonating with that because once I went through that dark period, I was able to reconnect with or recognize my inherent beingness that was beneath all of that, right? The behavior itself that led to the addiction, that led to these core false beliefs that I'm unworthy, I'm not good enough, and I'm unlovable. I thought I was broken and damaged. And it wasn't until I started to thaw out and realized that my essential beingness had never been lost. I just started believing in the programming of the world, limitation, lack, not good enough. And so I walked around vibrating with this frequency of I'm unlovable. And of course, I kept experiencing it over and over and over again. Getting into recovery was the first step. And then finding new thought a couple of years later was where I started to unlearn all the stuff that I had picked up so that I could remember the great remembering of the truth of who I am. It's not really a destination, it's a returning.
Yes, yes, yes. What I like about this conversation is we're reminding people that you didn't fix yourself, you actually discovered who you are. lot of people try to fix themselves or make them shapeshift into something they think they should be based on other people's opinions of them. But that's not what you did. You discovered who you remembered and discovered who you were, and allowed that to begin to shine. And he used for those of you tuning in, if you don't, he said he discovered new thought. If you don't know what that is, new thought, ageless wisdom is a spiritual teaching and a way of life that is aware that there's one presence called by millions of names everywhere, and we're all emanations of that presence, and that there are sacred laws by which we can practice the same laws that Jesus talked about, same laws that Gautama the Buddha talked about, Kuan Yin, all the great mystics. So when you hear him say new thought, it's really trans religiosity, but with deep love of the presence and a deep spiritual practice. So if you're here tuning in for the first time, that's what that means. So
Beautiful. I love that description because new thought really never quite resonated with me because it's really so much more than a thought, right? And when I came into these teachings, I accessed it through my mind. And so for the first couple of years, it was all about a mind-based reality around these laws, principles, and practices. And that led me to a place of ultimate discovery where it really was less about the mind and more about the beingness. And I love what you're saying because it is the ancient wisdom,
yeah,
of the world. And when I heard these things, I knew I wasn't hearing them for the first time. It was like coming home and coming home to myself.
yeah, they're ageless and perennial. If you take 2 plus 2 is 4, that's it was before time began, And when you consider these wonderful universal principles and this divine presence, it's forever. It's not time bound. So I like to say new thought, ageless wisdom. And a friend of mine who passed over a couple of years ago, Bishop Carlton Pearson, he used to tell the New Thought audiences, he said, "You guys are in New Thought. You should have one." You know, he you should put yourself in a position to actually have a new thought,
Yeah,
the
yeah.
spiritual practice and insight, actually have a new moment of inspiration. So that's what we're seeking to provide in this teaching. So we're not just fundamentalist religiosity, we're actually growing and unfolding and allowing the inspiration of the presence to take over. So we're constantly being made new, and that's the possibility. Now you have something called living in the questions. With all there's a lot of mishigash happening on the planet, a lot of uncertainty, a lot of division, polarity. There's a lot of appearance of separation between people, and they're vibing and what's right and what's wrong and who's right and all of that. But you want to bring people into this living in the question frequency. What does that mean?
Well, simply said, when I think I have the answer, or I believe I am my opinions, or I am that programming, like you said, of course I'm going to see the world through the lens of division, right? You are different than I am. You are different than me for this reason and for that reason. And then we start building these coalitions, if you will, of
Mhm.
separateness. And the truth is something much greater. So living in the question is a simple way of saying stay curious. And as
Yeah.
I ask myself open ended questions, I start to really question the paradigm. And when I say paradigm, just how I'm viewing the world. And I love what Carlton said, have a new thought, right? If I still have the same thought I've always had, I'm going to get the exact same results. It's actually profoundly simple in so many ways. So to be able to open up to different possibilities, curiosity opens us up, judgment restricts. And we are seeing a lot of judgment in the world right now. And so for those of us who are conscious beings, we have a role to play in tuning into curiosity and remaining open.
Right. And you're separating this from the answer mind, like I'm just going to look for the ultimate answer. You're saying that that is also a way by which we shrink our perception, looking for the answer.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
And a lot of religions are saying we have the answer. A lot of, modalities are saying we have the answer. And what we're saying is rather than seeking the answer, let's be in that question. Let's live in that question and notice the expansive quality of that. Because ultimately, there is that place within us that's beyond questions or answers. But the mind, because we've been told we live in a polarized country and a polarized world. But in my experience, we actually have been conditioned at polarized thinking. We're
yeah,
just looking through the lens of us and them and good and bad, as you said.
right. And also in the way you teach, being right
Yeah.
also prevents us from being in communion with each other.
That's right.
Yeah, because we see that a lot now too. You see it on the internet for those who scroll through the internet and or through Instagram and all those things. There's always somebody, that's right, and s- and then they put up a whole dynamic of therefore somebody's wrong.
Yes.
And so by staying curious and available and living in a question, you're describing a way by which we become available to insight, a new thought, revelation that flows through us rather than having an opinion or even a philosophy for that matter that separates. Because anything that separates is not ultimately real.
That's right.
Yeah.
And you look historically through humanity, I think there was a time in the evolution of the human species where finding a tribe was important for
Oh, yeah.
literal survival. So it's somewhere in our DNA, but you and I know there's something happening spiritually that's so much greater than that. And so to start to question all these points of view is to start to expand ourselves. And then we start to realize that there are different insights that come from this place of inner wisdom that's so different than an answer that comes from my mind. And, your visioning process has been life changing for me because those simple and yet so powerful questions that you ask in the visioning process. What's the highest possibility for my life right now? Let's collectively ask, what's the highest possibility for this country right now? What's
Mhm.
the highest possibility? Just living in that starts to expand and open us up to different ideas. Then I know I'm right and I know you're wrong.
Right, absolutely. And you said something I think very important that there was a time in which it was a level of tribalism for literal survival
Yeah,
in all parts of the world. And that was the ego's way of seeing separation and protecting us.
yeah,
But now we're on a planet in which time and space is dwarfed by the internet, by all manner of technology. There's no little tribes unless we make that happen. We're now looking to transcend that kind of tribalism consciousness so that we see that every being on the planet is our brother or sister. Every being on the planet is an emanation from the same source. And with New Thought Ageless Wisdom, with quantum physics, it corroborates the fact that we're all emanating from this divine source. Call it what you will, call it intelligence, call it love, call it beauty, call it life, call it God, whatever. And so to still stay in that right and wrong tribalism consciousness is actually to thwart one evolution. You know, you're actually preventing yourself from becoming yourself with
that's
that
right,
kind
and
of thought.
recognizing that who we are is infinite. We're not this limitation. We're not different fundamentally because of the tribe that we might associate with, but there's something within us that's so much greater than that. And one thing that's important for me to bring into this conversation is when I felt so broken in my early recovery, there was a woman who came into my life. I dedicate my life's work to her. Her name is Mary Helen. She made her transition in 1998, but her seeing me as an infinite being had
Mhm.
such a profound effect on me when I didn't yet have access to it or I didn't know I did. So for those of us who are asking, what can we do right now in the midst of this? We can start to see this differently. We can start to look beyond the divisiveness and we can hold a higher possibility. And in that holding, consciousness is shifted. And that is so much more powerful than fighting, which a lot of us are tempted to do.
Yeah, you're reminding me of one of my early moments as I was awakening. I'd had a spiritual awakening, but I carried some guilt about things that I did before I had my awakening. I was selling cannabis sativas in college and things like that. And but I had this awakening, so I went to see Lissa Sprinkles, and she was a great practitioner. And I'm telling you, when she opened the door, she didn't even say anything. She opened the door and looked at me, and I saw what she was looking at. She was looking at the Christ presence. She was looking at this spiritual idea. She wasn't looking at little Michael, in his early 20s. She was looking right at me and she was seeing God. And when that happened, the guilt that I was carrying about previous decisions dissolved. And I remember going in to sit in her living room with her, but I had nothing to talk about that much because her look, but obviously that look came from months and months and years of meditation and prayer and, you know, just healed everything. So I really understand when you dedicate your practice to Mary Helen because she saw you, you reminded me of that pivotal moment in my life as well. And I, I always remember after that, I would say, listen, do you have any clients? I mean, are you like, and she says, "Oh, no, baby. You know, I got my license. People come to see me from time." I said, "I'm letting everybody know about you." And I
That's
made her business cards back in the day when we had business cards. You know, we're back in the '70s now, you know, and started letting people know this is a great practitioner. You need to go see her. And then she started a women's group. That one conversation just opened up a vista of memory for me.
I love that. And, it's so interesting that you're saying that because we each have our unique gifts. And that's one of the things I love about you, Michael. Again, I'm going back to your visioning process to ask the questions, what are my unique skills and talents that can deliver spirit? Because we all have our own unique way. Mary Helen she would no more do this show. There is not a chance. She would not speak. Her gift was sitting with someone one on one. And when
Yeah.
she was in the process of making her transition, she said to me, she said, you were given the gift of extroversion, and I know that you are ready now to use that to deliver this message. And so it was like her handing me the torch.
Mhm.
I remember just feeling the calling to serve, and I get to use this extroverted sense of whatever I've come in with to use that as a vehicle, right? So I was tempted at one point to write the book, The Enlightened or The Awakened Narcissist, because we can use our personality.
That'd be very oxymoronic.
Provocative.
Very provocative. I remember when I founded Agape years later, and Lissa was leaving a particular position, something had closed off where she was working, and I said, "You're gonna come work for me." And she worked at Agape for years until she made a transition in our university. So she was a presence in our community, you know, that was just holding the space because she could say, "Yeah, baby, it's gonna be okay," like nobody's business. She actually knew it. But
And the beauty of that is that's really, I mean, you and I have said yes to that too. And now you get to, we get to be that for someone else. I
right.
work especially with people with addiction. They come in feeling so broken, so damaged, so hurt. My greatest passion now is training clinicians because clinicians tend to look at clients through the diagnostic lens. This person is bipolar. This person has this substance use disorder. And I'm inviting the question, what about looking for something beyond that within them? And realizing what quantum mechanics is showing us that in itself might have a better effect than 10 years of talk therapy, just instantaneous, like you and I experienced. And what a gift that we get to be that on the planet now. There's nothing better than that. I wake up each day and say, I am grateful. How can I serve?
Right.
Yeah,
Because what you're looking for, you activate.
that's right.
So if you're
That's right.
looking for negativity in someone, you can eventually find it, but you'll also help bring it into expression.
That's
But
right.
if you're looking for the beauty in an individual, the genius in an individual, then you will see it, and then you'll help create an atmosphere for that to also emerge because someone is actually seeing someone.
And they might feel that for the first time in years, right? That was my experience. It was almost like she saw the pre-programmed human. She saw the essence of me. And in her, it wasn't anything she taught me really, although I did use her words in my first book. It was more her way of being. And that had such a profound impact on me that I realized that's really in its simplest form who we've all come here to be, is to be a witness to something beyond the addiction, something beyond the struggle, something beyond the frustration, beyond the color of our skin, beyond our age. There's something essential,
Yeah. It's
and
real
that
and eternal.
vibration is magnified. Yeah.
Tell us the power of asking open-ended questions, and how does that fit in, the conversation with our life, our relationships, our healing?
Yeah, I have a series of open-ended questions that I use. Let's say you're in a situation that feels frustrating. You might pause and say, I wonder what's wanting to emerge here. I wonder what's the highest possibility here. What are the infinite possibilities in this situation? Or maybe I'm in a moment in my life when I feel so on purpose and so happy. I can pause and ask myself, how does it get even better than this?
That's
How
it.
can I
That's the question.
do
That's the
more? Yeah.
yeah. I
Yeah.
I ask people to ask that question whether things are going good in their life or whether things are going against what they think should be happening. Doesn't matter what's going on. If you ask that question, "How can it get better than this?" the universal presence by law will answer that question.
That's
So,
right.
because a lot of people are living under a superstitious thought that if things get really good, that means something bad's about to happen.
Right. The other shoe's gonna drop, right?
It's
That
gonna
the
drop. Oh my God, this can't. Oh my God, so many good things have happened today and this year. Something bad's got to happen.
Yeah.
But the universe is progressive; it is always unfolding, and if you stay in that frequency, how can it get better than this?
Yeah.
Then you become privy to a continual unfoldment. That doesn't mean you're not going to go through a cleanse. Doesn't mean you're not going to go through a letting go of that which doesn't serve you anymore. Doesn't mean that there won't be changes, that your ego might look at it and say that's bad.
Yeah.
But if you stay in that question that you're inviting us to ask, you stay above the fray
Yeah.
and you
That's
become
right.
more teachable by the universal presence. Yeah.
Yeah, and that, perhaps, possibly the greatest sentence ever spoken is said to have been spoken by Jesus, and that is to be in the world, but not of it.
Yeah.
To be in this world, I mean, and that's one of the things I love about Agape, because in my experience, a lot of new thought kind of stays out of the fray of what's happening in the world. But you're saying, no, let's bring that consciousness to what's happening in the world. Let's bring that to the communities. Let's bring that to all the isms that are happening so that we can be a part of healing that. And for many years, I thought, let me just unplug completely and pretend like
Hmm.
they weren't happening. But what we're saying is something so much different. And that is, there's a place within me that's unharmed and unharmable. And when I know that, then I can go out into the world and be of service, but in a very different frequency.
Yeah, because you're actually bringing the vibrational answer. And again, you've transcended being right about something. You're actually holding the vibration of whether it's love or compassion or generosity or forgiveness. You're holding that. And that being in the world is, as you say, you're not seeking to escape what's going on in the world. We're not using prayer and meditation and spiritual community to escape. We're using all of those technologies to have a realization of who we are. And then, as we say at Agape, that we become a beneficial presence on the planet. Not a beneficent person, because that can be a do-gooder, and you end up doing bad sometimes trying to do good. But
Been there. Yeah.
you become a presence, a beneficial presence. And you did bring up the teacher, Yeshua ben Joseph, the master teacher Jesus, as most people know him by. And he said, in substance, in the world, there will be trials and tribulations. But then he gave a spiritual practice. He said, but be of good cheer, because I've overcome that world.
That's right.
And so those three things right there is like, it's just like condensed. There's going to be stuff going down.
That's right.
Stay in the joy as best you can, be of good cheer, and overcome that world, so that when you're in that world, you're not bringing the same negativity, the same polarization, the same hate, judgment, etc. You're bringing something else.
That's right.
And it's simple, but it takes
That's right.
practice.
Because hate doesn't heal hate, like shame doesn't heal shame, right? And if I'm in woundology and I'm in reactivity to what's happening and I'm in the wrongness of that, and my job is to make it right, there's going to be struggle and strife. And there's certainly plenty of reasons to say, I understand why someone does that. But what we're inviting is, and for me, one of the keys is I allow myself to feel the emotion without attaching a story to it. Let
Mm.
me not say, I feel this way because of the presidential election. I feel this way because of this group. I feel this. Let me feel that so that it can move through me. The pre programmed human feels, 2-year old feels intently. And when we let them, they move through that and come back to joy. And that's really a very different way of, I'm not pretending like
Yeah,
something's not upsetting.
yeah, yeah.
I'm allowing myself to feel it and then moving through it.
Absolutely. I don't want to leave this particular point because this is quite profound. Because I use it the same way when people are dealing with a physical malady. I will say, feel the emotion around it, but don't label it.
Yes.
It's the same thing. Don't, because if you go into the materia medica, they're going to give it a label. Oh, this is cancer, or this is
Yeah.
diabetes, or this is whatever basic titles they have. And then you focus on that label, and then that becomes a part of your identity. Then you keep repeating it. So you don't deny, your body is hurting right there, or whatever the case may be. Don't label it.
That's right.
Don't label it. Just be aware of it. Know that it's there, or start to bring your attention somewhere else. So you're saying the very same thing. Don't label.
Yeah.
Feel, and then feeling that the feeling is not just an emotion. I mean, there's feelings and there's emotions. I always separate those two. An emotion is the condensation of previously held perceptions that have condensed himself with energy. A feeling is a connection with the presence of God, presence of love and beauty. So you're letting people know, yeah, be with it.
Yeah.
Don't identify.
Yeah, and notice if the mind wants to label or attach a story to it. When you spoke
Story. Yeah, right.
when you spoke at Agape Bay Area, you said something that I absolutely loved and it stuck with me. And you said if you're having problems with one of your knees, don't focus on the one that's having the problem. Focus on the one that's doing well. Feel into the energy of that and then bring that energy to the other knee. We're not
Right.
denying that the pain is there, but we're not focusing on that. We're focusing on the part of us who always is vibrating with wellness. And when I started working in the addiction treatment field in 2008, I looked at the consciousness, the paradigm of the time was so diagnostically focused, just like you're saying. Well, this behavior you have, we're going to label it as bipolar. We're going to label it as borderline personality disorder. And I, of course, knew that by that very labeling, they were going to start to identify with that more. And we were going to say things like, let's not forget how bad it was so you don't forget, right? Really, the message was, let's not forget how bad you were so you don't
Right.
forget, right? And that's just going to keep everyone stuck.
Absolutely. No, this is beautiful. I'm loving this conversation. It's gone in so many, not hasn't gone into so many directions. It's an arc of unfolding. And this emerged from the power of open-ended questions. Give us an example of an unopened question. Like how do people normally?
Well, okay. So open-ended questions can't be answered with yes or no, right?
Right.
Also, I invite people not to start with why, because the question that popped up when you said that, even though technically it's open-ended, my favorite question for years, and I'm just going to confess right now, why does this keep happening to me?
That's a
I,
victim question.
that was my mantra for a decade. And lo and behold, I kept feeling victimized by the world and so small. And I remember early in my journey, I was on a treadmill and I had a Walkman. So that's how long ago it was with, big yellow one. And I was listening to our now friend, Marianne Williamson speaking. And she said, everyone keeps asking, why do I keep attracting unavailable people? And the question is, why am I attracted to them? And I literally felt treadmill. I was just like, but then I went further with that in my journey to say, what am I wanting them to be available for?
Right.
Am I unconsciously trying to choose a partner to do my own healing?
Right.
And that, of course, is a setup for both of us. So
Right.
an open-ended question is one that empowers rather than restricts.
Yes, yes. I was just speaking to my friend, Sean Stevenson, who has the Model Health Show podcast,
Mm.
and he was reminding me that when he was sick, when he was a young man, he had a spine the age of an 80-year-old man. It was very difficult to walk. He was in a lot of pain, and he kept asking this question, you know, "Why doesn't anybody help me? Why is this happening to me?" And then something happened, and he changed his question. He said, "How can I get healthy?
That's
How
right.
can I bring more health into my life?"
That's right.
And later on after that, he bumped into my life visioning process, and he said, and somebody came to him, a friend of his, and for the first time took him to a health food store. He had never been in one. He had never eaten a vegetable until he was in his 20s. He came from a family with poverty. They were on, WIC, free food, and so it's just all processed food. And he opened himself up to a new world of, "What? There's vegetables, there's fruits," and then he ultimately went to college, became a nutritionist, and, but as you're describing this, he shifted his question.
That's right.
Why can't the doctors help me? Why can't people help me? Why is this happening to me? To how can I be healthy?
Yeah.
And change.
One question that just came up for me when you were saying that is, where does the power to heal reside?
Yeah,
That question came up. Where does the power to heal reside, right? Is it something that's in the doctor? Of course, it's in the way we eat and the way we exercise. And then it also is something that lives deep within us. The body's always bending toward health if we allow
right,
it, if we
right.
create the opportunity for it to be in its own healing.
Absolutely. So at this point in your unfoldment, what's next emerging for you? I know you're in greater service. What is your latest insight, or what is the next thing that's emerging for you?
Well, as you know, dedicating my life to visioning. And it's interesting that today is the day that we're having this conversation. It's also the day that I've set aside the afternoon for my second visioning of the year to ask what's wanting to emerge. And what
Right.
has been showing up for me the last few weeks is to help be a part of healing the healers.
Mm,
There's so many healers on the planet, and I have been one of them that I thought there are people who are broken and I'm here to fix them. And I see that dynamic in behavioral health. I see it in the addiction treatment space. And that's not actually being a healer, right? That's being a fixer. So I am called to this year. My word is expansion and healing. So I'm really in the midst of the question, how can I create a space for healers to heal? That's the question that's emerging, and the answers are starting to come.
beautiful. I think it's a very important question because oftentimes those that get the label of being a healer sometimes burn themselves out,
Right.
because they have that label. Sometimes they even forget of what does the healing, and that they're facilitators. That's a good because that's really it's a good movement to go into because there's so many people that have emerged over the last 40 years to be in this particular realm of healing, inspiring, uplifting,
Yeah.
helping people transform their life coaches, practitioners, etc. That's good.
Yeah.
Now, in one of your videos, um, you came to understand that compassion and gratitude and judgment are choices and ways of being. That's what you said in your video. What do you exactly mean by that?
Well, what I mean by that is I spent a great part of my life unconsciously choosing everything. Everything that was trapped in my unconscious was running the show. I didn't realize I was choosing judgment or choosing happiness. I thought it
Mm,
was something that happened. The conditions would line up in a certain way, and I would either be happy or I'd be angry or I'd be sad. And I came to understand that really we're always choosing. We're either choosing from the unconscious or the subconscious, or we're
right.
choosing consciously. And when we're in super conscious energy, in other words, when I'm really tapped into listening intently, using these open ended questions, what's the highest possibility? What is wanting to emerge now? I start to understand that I can choose happiness. I can choose judgment. I can choose to open up or close off. They're all choices. And I like to not be in the rightness or the wrongness of it, but ask what gets created when I judge, what gets
Ah,
created when I
nice.
compassion, what gets created when I choose connection.
Right. And then underneath that, choice is a function of expanded awareness. And unless we're having some kind of expansion of our awareness, we're basically reacting to everything.
Yes.
You're either reacting or responding from your higher nature. And when you respond from your higher nature, that's a choice, but you can't choose if in fact you're limited your awareness by the disempowering questions, the misidentification of yourself by putting labels on yourself. Choice is a function of expanded awareness, and every time we have an insight and revelation through the inner work that we do, our choice ability increases. We can actually choose joy in a difficult situation. You
Absolutely.
know, it's like we look at extreme cases. Extreme cases give us the possibility when in fact we're not in an extreme case. So you look at the extreme cases of Nelson Mandela in jail for 27 years, coming to love his captors and bring them into the forgiveness tribunal when he was set free. That's an extreme case, but he could choose it because his consciousness had expanded. You can look at the extreme case of His Holiness the Dalai Lama, who had to run for his life out of Tibet to be given asylum in India, and how he chooses to love all Chinese people. He says, Chinese people, then they're not their government. I don't have any hate nor malice, and I don't want to do anything to the government that would hurt the people. That's a big choice.
Big
Uh,
choice. Yeah,
from
and I love what you're saying because we can only choose that, or I could only choose that from an expanded awareness. When I was trapped in the identity of the world, when I was in what we might call race consciousness, just the consciousness of the human race,
right.
it's very difficult to choose that because I have all these ideas of rightness and wrongness. But in the
Yes.
expanded awareness, I can be curious, and then that curiosity can bring even more expanded awareness. And then I realize something so profound. And as you said, those examples provide us a blueprint. We
Yeah.
can do this now because we have seen it demonstrated. And I've demonstrated it in my own life in both directions. And I know which one feels better, and I know which one creates more love and harmony. And that's what I'm choosing today. It becomes very simple.
Absolutely. The extreme examples are still in the newest sphere of the planet. They're in the mental atmosphere of the planet, and they are the possibility of the evolution of our species. Our lesser brothers and sisters, when something bad happens, even governments are basically the last bastion of the ego. My country, right or wrong, and that type of thing. My country's better than your country, and you know, when something happens, there's a quick demonization of the other nation and a wronging and a identification of the other nation. We're right, they're wrong. And these are our younger brothers and sisters just happen to be in governmental leadership around the world. They're oftentimes most egocentric people, you know.
Yes.
And we're asking, and when you see these extreme cases of Bishop Tutu, Mother Teresa, Dalai Lama, etc., that's the next stage of our evolution that people sometimes think that's impossible. Most people aren't gonna be like that. People are always gonna be stuck in their survival self, their ego itself, their separate self. And for people like us, if we believed that, we couldn't do what we're doing,
That's right.
you know?
And to understand, not just intellectually, but experientially, to embody that, because we're really talking about embodying that as a way of being. Because you asked the question, what do I mean by a way of being? It's not just a choice, because I can make choice from my mind. Oh, I'm going to choose judgment. I'm going to choose compassion. But a way of being is something different. That means I've embodied a greater knowing, not that it's right to be this way in the world, but it creates more peace and harmony. In my own life, it creates more health, it creates more prosperity. I feel younger every day. I feel like I have more energy every day. I'm a little
That's a good affirmation. I
That's
feel
right.
younger every day.
Younger every day. And I'm going to say I look younger every day too. How's that?
Why not?
Why not? That's right.
When I was attending USC, there was a philosophy class, and everybody's going through all these weeks of teaching, and then in the final paper, all he wrote was why, and people just they wrote everything they had learned in his class, except for one person. He wrote why not. He got an A.
That's brilliant. Were you that one person, Michael?
No, I wasn't. I wasn't in that particular class. I was just do about it.
I love it. That's beautiful.
Why not? He wrote why not and walked out the room.
Uh, Brilliant, and that's such a beautiful thing to be in. Maybe that's the simplest question. If someone, comes to us because, I unplugged from the news in 2016. I almost feel I don't know why it took me so long to unplug from it, but unplugging in 2016 gave me so much freedom. And people will say, "Well, aren't you burying your head in the sand?" I'm like, "No, I'm not. Watching the news is burying my head in the sand. That's being in the consciousness of division." I've heard you say it's not news, it's olds. It's the same
Right,
old story being
right.
told over and over again. Yeah,
Absolutely. And I like that. Something was just passing through my awareness, but it'll come back. Now, as we're coming to the end of this particular beautiful conversation, is there anything that we haven't covered that you would say to yourself 5 minutes after we say goodbye? Oh, I meant to say that. This question would have been good. Is there anything bubbling up in you at that level?
such a beautiful question, Michael. And I guess what I would say is, sometimes I'm thinking of myself when I was earlier in my evolution, listening to this. And I think the question I'd be asking, or I might say something like, well, that sounds good for these guys because, somehow they've done it. But what about me? How do I do it? Or is it possible?
Mm.
And so the question that I would invite someone to live in is what else is possible here? What else
Yeah.
is possible? Because what was once for the saints and the mystics and the spiritual teacher is now becoming available to us all. And what I mean by available, the information's always been there. I mean, great
Yeah.
past taught it for, centuries, but now we're accessing it in a new way. So I guess what I'd want to say is that everything that we're talking about is something that already lives within each person, and we have direct access to it through the process of being in the silence and listening intently, making a conscious connection with that essential being, and then pretty much unlearning or questioning, as we've been saying, every point of view I've ever had that has prevented me from knowing that.
Right. It's a real authentic democracy. All of this is democratized. The broadcast from pure spirit is everywhere simultaneously all the time, and there's no on and off. And now it's seeped its way into our culture over the last 40 years. This conversation 40 years ago would have been woo-woo, you
Right.
know. Now it's corroborated by brain science, neuroscience, quantum physics, biofeedback, that an individual that's hanging out in a space of unified awareness, their thoughts have a higher frequency than someone that's hanging out in hate or judgment. This can all be proven now. So it's not woo-woo, it's actually religious science.
Right. Yes,
It's
science
scientific
is.
spirituality.
Yeah, I mean, science is now measuring what the mystics have been teaching, right? And
Right,
and like
right,
through neuroplasticity in the brain, we
right.
know that if I have the same thought over and over again, I create a new neuro an old I concretize the old neural pathway. But when I have a new way of seeing and being, because a lot of times we think in the scientific model, change your behavior and create a new neural pathway, but it's consciousness itself, really change my point of view,
Yeah.
change what I'm focusing on. And that very way of being starts to change the brain. Because a lot of times we'll say, well, just happens in the brain. I was born that way. It's just genes. But we now know that they're not as solid as we once believed. And we're just at the beginning. Science is just starting to question it. So we're living in exciting times. What a great chapter we've chosen this time.
Absolutely. You just mentioned epigenetics is what you mentioned, that which is beyond the genetic field that allows for the genes to actually change when we change our mind, change our heart, open our heart, open and come into that love, that compassion. The genes, your DNA changes. It's not fixed. I know we're getting into a lot of different material here, but there used to be a moment, and it still happens today with people, depending on how they're trained, doctors are trained, but before they would ask patients all the information about their parents,
Right.
you
Family history.
know? Yeah,
Yeah.
all this history. What did your aunt have? And
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
we know now that that's very limited. That only is applicable if you have the same thoughts, opinions, the same food, the same if you have the same habits your parents had, then you're gonna produce the same results,
That's right.
the same diseases that may be in your genetic code. But if you change, then you don't activate that disease, you see? And so many of the young doctors that are coming out who've studied neuroplasticity and epigenetics and things of that particular nature, that question is like number 10 rather than number 1, you know?
Amazing.
It's a I know what I was gonna say earlier when we were talking about questions and affirmations and things. I would tell people one of the greatest affirmations you can say when all this stuff is going on in the world of appearances, "So what?" So what? Okay. And then so what with spiritual practice leads you to what's so. What's so is the changeless, causeless beingness of the presence everywhere. And then what's so leads you to so. So you go
That is so
go from
beautiful.
so what to what's so to so.
So that's so beautiful, Michael. I love it.
You
I
reminded me
we always count on your mind to have these beautiful frameworks that are just out of the box and so beautiful. So I love it. Thank you.
but I like the way they give it to me though. They give it to me very simple. You know what I mean?
Yes.
It's very simple. And
Simple
so
and
what?
true.
What so? So.
That is,
Anything anything last
you
thing
know
you wanna
what?
say?
I wanted to take a moment to thank you for being who you are on the planet. I've known you for some time now, and you're the real deal for anyone watching. you're the real deal. And what I mean by that is like you said yes to your calling, you said yes to your service, and you demonstrate it so powerfully and so beautifully. And I think you're a way shower for thousands and possibly millions of people on the planet. So I just want to honor you for saying yes to that. I know what it takes. You and I have had private conversations about what it takes to stay on that, to stay with the yes, to stay with the service. So I just want to take the moment to thank you for that.
TJ, thank you so much for that. And thank you for being you. Thank you for blazing new trails in this teaching and in a very powerful way. And I would like for you to just tell individuals how they can be in contact with you. And I'd like you to tell them your latest book as well.
Yeah.
If you have it there, you can show it, but if not, we'll put it in the show notes anyway.
Yeah, my latest one, let's see if I can point the right way. Conscious Creation, which was the foreword is written by this incredible person named Michael Bernard Beckwith. It's been out for a little bit, but I just got all new book covers. So that's been my new thing that's been going on. And I have 15 published books now with all the workbooks and the journals. So tjwoodward.com is the place to find me. You'll find all my socials there. And Michael, I'm so grateful for you and who you are in the world.
Thank you, and I'm grateful for you. I'm grateful for your hand in Agape Bay Area, and thank you for. I'm saying thank you from all the people that you've had an opportunity to move them into recovery, into a greater discovery of who they are. Thank you for being a way shower in that area as well.
Yeah, thank you.
So everyone, TJ Woodward, Michael Beckwith, saying, as he was saying earlier, you don't look at us and think, that we're the exception. No, 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 no. Spirit of the living one doesn't make special people. Everyone is blessed with the same possibility and potential. People that you admire, they're not special, they're specialized. You see somebody who plays the piano really well, they specialize with their time to actually learn. And so there are no special people. They're just people who have specialized. We're asking you to understand living in the question, understand open-ended question, to specialize in excellence, and your life will glow beyond your wildest imaginings. Peace and blessings, everyone. Peace and blessings. I truly hope that you are enjoying Take Back Your Mind podcast. The Take Back Your Mind podcast is sponsored primarily by the Agape International Spiritual Center. In other words, everything that you see in terms of the staff that puts this together, the editing, the equipment, all of this is sponsored by our Agape International Spiritual Center. So if you are enjoying the podcast, I'm inviting you to support the sponsor. Support Agape. Simply go to agapelive.com and make a donation. And say in the donation that you are supporting the podcast. It allows us to keep broadcasting. It allows us to keep putting these magnificent moments together with these wonderful people that I get to interview. We keep having the possibility of updating the equipment that's necessary and providing the wonderful content that many of you are writing in and saying, I really love the podcast. Support the podcast. Support the sponsor. Agape International Spiritual Center. agapelive.com. You can also text to donate. You can text the word give to 424-321-6243 and put podcast so that we know that you're really supporting this wonderful podcast. Our secondary sponsor is Adaptozen, Adaptozen. This is my superfood greens. It's nutritionally dense because I teach spirit, mind, and body. We want our body temples to be healthy. So one of the products is my superfood greens. You can go to nutrarise.com. Those three little lines you see, you hit those three little lines and you'll see Adaptozen. There's two products, my superfood greens and a product called Elevate. which are organic mushrooms for your health. You can put both in your smoothies so that you have main ingredients for the health of your body temple. These are our sponsors. Primary sponsor, Agape International Spiritual Center. Secondary sponsor, Adaptogen. I want you to be healthy. I want you to be wise. Circulate and share. Peace and blessings. Radical blessings to you. During this portion of the Take Back Your Mind podcast, we always have a few moments for the essentials. Meditation. Meditation is paying undistractable attention to reality. Meditation has two parts to it. It actually has many, but for the sake of this moment that we have together, it has that which is called agitation and purification, or insight and revelation. Meaning there are times in your meditation practice, as I've been teaching here at our university, there are moments where there's agitation, where it doesn't feel like anything is happening. Often that's a clearing out time. You're clearing out mental and emotional debris. And then there are times where you feel absolutely connected. And those are times when you're perhaps receiving an insight, a revelation, a bit of guidance. We never say, I had a good meditation or a bad meditation. They're just two aspects of the meditation practice. One is clearing and cleansing. One's insightful and revelatory. Let's go into meditation for a few moments. I invite you to close your outer eyes. I invite you to tap just at the space between your eyebrows. And I want you to say to yourself, I am willing to see without my physical eyes. I am willing to see without my physical eyes. I am willing to see without my physical eyes. Bring your hands back on your lap, facing upward as a sign of receptivity. And be aware as I say this to you that you are pure awareness. You're not merely your body with eyes and ears. You are awareness that has a body. And your awareness can see the invisible and can hear what the sensorium would call the inaudible. We start with this awareness. We're intending to wake up to our real nature. That's our intention. Intention carries an energy. We're intending to wake up to our true nature. Pure awareness. Pure consciousness. Allow your heart to feel into that intention. Let this become the priority for these few moments. Not merely the benefits of meditation, but the practice of meditation itself. I intend to wake up to my true nature. Let your attention embrace the vibration of that intention. Let your attention embrace that this is the first time you've ever practiced the art and the science of meditation. Though in your mind you may consider yourself a veteran to meditation or one who has tried it many, many times, but we always enter into this practice as if it's our very first time. We're not trying to replicate a past experience. We're seeking to be open and available to now. Embrace the idea that yes, this is the first time, and that yes, you're in a dynamic listening posture, not with ears, but with your awareness. You are open and receptive to catching the universal broadcast of let there be light, let there be life, let there be beauty, let there be intelligence everywhere. So you're listening with your whole being to hear the inaudible. Notice that your body's breathing, and notice that you are aware of the breath, that the breath is happening in present moment, not the past or the future. So it's riveting you to be present. Present to what? This is your first time. Deep listening. So that we transcend present moment ultimately to the eternal now that is timeless. Another moment of pure silence, stillness, silence, sacred solitude. Be still. It is from this expanded awareness that we give something now. We give thanks that we are alive. We give thanks that we exist. We give thanks that our awareness of who we are has expanded. We give thanks that we can live in gratitude and watch as gratitude itself becomes a dynamic field of receptivity to more good than we could possibly imagine. When is this happening? It's happening right now. And so it is. Amen. Your time is very valuable, so I want to thank you for lending us your ear and participating in taking back your mind. If you want to submit a question for the question of the week, please submit it to podcast@michaelbeckwith.com. If you've enjoyed what you've heard today, please submit a review and let us know your thoughts. Stay on top of current episodes by subscribing to the podcast so that you'll receive alerts and not miss one single episode. And feel free to share this podcast with all of your friends and family. And until we meet again, take back your mind, and you will take back your life. Peace and blessings.